This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for How to Super Age with Elise Marie Collins and her guest of the day.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Great. I'm so happy to be here, and we have a very special guest today. Her name is Karen Wang Diggs. She is a certified nutritionist, therapeutic chef. Okay, that's really the reason I have her on. Therapeutic chef, culinary instructor, and author of the acclaimed book, Happy Foods, Over 100 Mood-Boosting Recipes. With her expertise in nutrition and a passion for the culinary arts, Karen has empowered countless individuals to achieve vibrant health and a happier mood through her nutritional guidance and delicious recipes. Karen is also the creator of The Sacred Kitchen, an online course that combines cooking with culinary rituals, science-packed nutrition tips, and ancient meditations to ignite our spiritual potential by honoring the nourishing hearth of the home. I am so excited to talk to her. Before we go on, I just want to mention that my book, Super Ager, also has a few similar tips, but I know we're going to get an even bigger scope of how we can create a sacred kitchen, happy foods. I mean, I have a chapter on foods, chapters on sleep. This is all about aging, super ager, how to be a super ager. And my book really talks about things from an ancient wisdom perspective, but bringing it to the modern world. And I know that our guest today is going to weave in some extra special tips and tricks and similar ideas that are contained in her book and her work in therapeutic cooking. So I can't wait to hear what she's got to say. I want to start with a question. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, just give an overview of the Sacred Kitchen, because I know I like to cook and there's an alarm going off. I'm not cooking anything, but sometimes we have, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but sometimes, we almost cook out of drudgery, or we think I've got to eat healthy, and it becomes, it doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound inviting. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't want to eat healthy, because it sounds boring or tedious, and they're not going to be happy because they associate happiness with bad things, bad food. So I know that was kind of two questions. Maybe let's start with the first one. Let's change it up. Let's start with, why do foods make you happy? Because some people think like, oh, a really decadent dessert filled with all kinds of even unhealthy ingredients, because there's desserts with healthy ingredients. That's going to make me happy. But what are other foods that can make us happy in the same way? And if I disappear off screen, I'm still listening. I'm just going to turn off my alarm.
Great, Elise. And thank you again for inviting me onto your podcast. And I do love your book, Super Ager. We all want to be super agers, right? So to answer your question about food and happiness, I'm just going to quickly say that my mother, growing up, she was not a cook. She even managed to put a can of spaghetti-o into a steamer, but neglected to puncture holes in the can, and it exploded in our kitchen. Sorry, Mom, she's no longer with us, but I adore her. But that was the level of her cooking expertise. So therefore, my siblings and I had to fend for ourselves. So the very first thing that I remember cooking was to scramble an egg in a little pan with some butter. And that made me really happy as a child, because there was a sense of accomplishment. And I think there was a level of safety as well. Like, I can do this. I'm not going to starve. I don't have to wait for Mom to cook dinner. But having said that, because my mother was not, a cook by any means, my sister did pick up the thread, and she became a very good cook, and she taught me too when I was younger. But because there was not a lot of emphasis put towards home cooked meals, I ate pretty crappy when I was growing up, pretty much like all kids did at a certain time. TV dinners was a favorite. Mashed potato that came from a box, box cereals, you name it. And I think as a consequence, through years and years, and then being very stressed in my early 20s, going through college and life experience, whatnot, it led me to have multiple health issues. The major one was actually leaky gut, which I was not aware of or cognizant of because I was not a nutritionist at that time. And in tandem, I did start training as a chef, and working as a chef is a very, very hard life, physically, mentally, very exhausting. So anyway, to shorten the question, I illustrated that to say that when you can cook something healthy, it's not only about satisfying that momentary desire. It is actually about nourishing your body and your emotional well-being. So the piece of chocolate cake, let's just say a very conventional piece of chocolate cake from a supermarket chain, might momentarily give you some joy, maybe 5 to 10 minutes as you're devouring it. But over time, it's going to spike your blood sugar. You are going to go on a roller coaster ride of the sugar, traveling through your bloodstream. You'll have that spike of energy and then you crash. So imagine doing that multiple times a day, right? The typical sort of comfort food, a piece of chocolate cake here, 2 hours later, maybe a donut, especially if you're working in an office. And then you go home and you're hungry and you grab a piece of whatever, usually carb based, high in fat that's not good for you, and usually a lot of sugar. So this is not sustainable, but sadly, so many people do this day after day, year after year. So to me, although that seems to be happy food, it is actually sad food, as in the standard American diet. So therefore, cooking something in your kitchen using raw ingredients that are good and that might have come from the farmer's market, it's beyond the dish itself. It's your relationship to empowering yourself to create something healthy. And then you do that. If you have family, then you extend that, as an extension of your love to nourish your family. And then if you are involved with your neighborhood, your community, then it's extension of the community. So one dish becomes a fulcrum in which happiness radiates. So that's what I have to say.
I really like that. And it has a depth that
Yes.
that piece of cake doesn't have. It's
Right.
very surface, and that depth, and then that speaks to interconnectedness. We're connecting to people through food. And sometimes that connection, I'm thinking of especially at work, and I work during the week as a job coach. And sometimes we celebrate someone's birthday with that same cake. It comes from a big chain, which is fine. Sometimes I'll eat it, sometimes I won't. I kind of listen to my body. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that because, and sometimes it is a way to connect. Maybe, our work relationships aren't as deep as our family relationships, but how can we nourish, something with more depth? Because if we're living on that surface, some of the words I heard you say are sustainable and empowering. We don't want to go through life disempowered and in a way where we are, kind of going up and down. Like it's not, if we had we take sometimes better care of our cars, for example,
I agree.
sure they're serviced, and what about ourselves? We need to have that sustainability. So I love that you said that. I do have to just interject for a moment about my own mom, because when you were telling that story, I'm like, wow, I feel like I kind of have a similar story, but it's from the opposite angle, because my mom, her mother struggled with depression when she was growing up, and my mom took on all the cooking, and she's been like a master chef since, since I was born. She was obsessed with cookbooks. She was always cooking, and she tells a story about getting on a stool and making a sauce when she was very,
Oh, that's so endearing.
yeah, because
Yeah.
she wanted to cook and her mom was often too depressed to
Mm.
get out of bed. And for me growing up, I always had a lot of, it was health foods, but back in the day, no one called it health foods. The one thing I wish she did was and she says this too, she wishes she let me in the kitchen more because she was kind of controlling, like she wanted it a certain way. But I think that's
Right.
how she dealt with her family. She's going to make the food and
Mhm.
leave me alone. And she wants to do it her way because it was kind of her space and her realm. So I think it's interesting how we sort of go in these different patterns. Sometimes our parents, give us one thing, but not another. And I love that you became a holistic chef. Maybe, especially in longevity, creating a sacred kitchen, I think helps us to, especially as we age, look towards the bigger picture. Because in Ayurveda, I know you know a little bit of Ayurveda because I've seen some of your podcasts online, but
Right.
we go into that stage of life that is more of wisdom and it's like, to me, it's the air stage, it's the big picture, and it is more sacred. So as we age, do you have any tips or simple rituals that you would recommend, maybe to someone who's like, what the heck is a sacred kitchen? Or maybe somebody like me who I could up my game.
Yes, and thank you for that question. So when I created the course, The Sacred Kitchen, I actually had to ask myself, well, what are you going to teach in the Sacred Kitchen? So I really went back to how I started in my spiritual journey. I grew up Catholic, and then eventually I made my way to Buddhism as a means of learning to meditate. And, it's been several decades. And I thought about working in commercial kitchens where the level of angst and stress is so high that it was in no way sacred. And for that reason, I've stepped out of commercial kitchens, although sometimes I still miss cooking behind the line. So then it made me really think about the energy of that food, right? If you buy a burger, let's say from some chain, and that person is cursing every minute that they're in that, very unhealthy environment, flipping burgers, using hydrogenated oils and whatnot, then that energy of the food that eventually someone takes in is basically, I'll just call it negative energy. Because everything, as you know, is energy. And Ayurveda is very clear that everything is energy. And so therefore, it really made me think, where can you control the energy? The best places in your home, right? What you do not bring into your home, you don't expose yourself to primarily. And so I also think about our ancestors. People liked to gather around a fire. We gather around a fire for storytelling, for safety, to cook food. And this is ingrained in our DNA. And the closest proximity to that nowadays in modern homes would be in the kitchen. Even if you do not have a stove that's gas power, it is the obvious place. That is the hearth and heart of the home. So if we really make the intention to turn that into a sacred space of nourishment for our body, our mind, our spirit, then whatever you are cooking becomes nourishing. And if you really establish that thought, then it's really not about, like woo-woo spirituality, turn your home into this phantasmical gore place. It's really about honoring what you bring in. And so the quality of the food then becomes important. You are going to give more thought to, well, where did this apple come from? Who grew this apple? Or this head of cabbage? Or this piece of chicken? Then you start to really think about how these ingredients were produced. Maybe you'll start to think about, if you're purchasing eggs, well, how were these chickens raised? Was it factory produced, or were the hens running around, in an open space being happy? And then I think incrementally, layer by layer, you start to become very cognizant of the energy of the food that you bring in. And then if we could also take time to have intention when we cook. You mentioned that a lot of people think that cooking is drudgery. Like, why do I have to cook? Can't I just order takeout? Okay. In and of itself, I think the whole process of cooking something can become meditation. I mean, we know that in Zen Buddhism, I mean, very well known, be in the moment. Are you in the moment? If you're not in the moment, then you're not really putting your attention to anything. And so if you're cooking an egg, you know, back to that moment as a child when I was cooking that egg, I think I was really in the moment without knowing it, because my concentration was, can I cook this egg? And when I did, it was great. And so simple acts of just cooking something very simple in your kitchen can become a point of meditation. Just slow down, you take a few deep breaths, you honor the food, the raw material, and you do whatever you do. Even the act of washing dishes can become enjoyable because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I personally love dishwashing because you might have a messy sink, and then in 10 minutes you wash up, and then you have a clean space to begin again. So again, you know, going back to like meditation point, you have a beginning, you have a middle, and you have an end. And so every simple act can have that quality. And I think it's very empowering if we can just slow down and recognize that.
I love that. It speaks to how you do one thing is how you do everything. And
Yes. Yes.
when we're frustrated with something in our lives and we want to push it, you know, it's like, take that time, take those baby steps, one dish at a time, one little sponge wipe at a time.
Yes.
When you're
Yes.
resisting that, when you're resisting the dirty dishes in the sink, what else are you resisting? What else?
Yes, I love that analogy. Yeah, you know, dirty dishes are piling up. What else is piling up, right?
What am I avoiding, right? And
Oh.
instead of blaming
Yeah.
it on the dishes in the sink, I know I'm guilty of blaming it on, I
You know,
don't have time.
Karen, I love your idea of this sacred kitchen, because my son, when he lived at home, I couldn't be in the kitchen when he was cooking. I never truly understood it. But he really is in the moment when he is cooking. And last night, he is 1,000 miles away from me now. He called to tell me what he was cooking and how he was cooking it. And he was totally prepared, but he was totally in it. And so this morning when I talked to him, I said, so how did it come out? And he said, it was the best meal I've ever had. And it took him over an hour to make it. I said, did you have your TV on? No. He had his earbuds in, so he was sort of listening to music. But he said it was the most delightful meal he's ever made. So obviously he too has a sacred kitchen.
That's really, I mean, it's just the sheer joy of doing that, you know, really focusing in on being in the moment, creating this fabulous dish, and then the enjoyment of it. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I love that. And it speaks to, you can cook for yourself, you can cook, you can have a dinner party. And I would challenge our listeners, try this experiment, because I've done this, especially with dinner parties or cooking for others. Notice what space you're in. If you're in a funky space or kind of agitated or irritated and you cook a meal for others, I'm telling you, it won't taste as good. Then try doing it, and I even speak into the food. I'll be like, this is the best, you know, dal ever. This is the best curry ever. This is the best stew ever. And just kind of really try to think positive thoughts. That's the best way I can describe it. Whatever comes to you, because you might not feel comfortable telling food that it's the best ever. But I swear people have said that, then they're like, this is the best curry I've ever had because I was like I brought that to the food and it really works. And it's a great experiment in how mindset affects so many things. And then we actually put that into our bodies. So it's like an affirmation that really goes deep.
Sure.
Yeah, that is so nice. And I know it's not done so much anymore, rarely. Even just saying a prayer or a moment of gratitude before a meal when you gather around the food, it is so powerful. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to take a moment and talk about our sponsor, Magic Mind. They are an incredible little drink. They're 2-ounce drinks. So if you are busy, especially in the morning, that's when some of us, have to get out the door. Maybe we've got kids, maybe we've got a job that we need to get to, and we're talking about cooking, we're talking about taking all this time. You may not have that time in the morning. Magic Mind has the raw ingredients. It's a little energy drink, and it was created by James Bishara, who is a Silicon Valley angel investor, entrepreneur, and he actually had a similar health journey to many of us on How to Super Age, where he bumped up against poor health. I don't know his age, but he's pretty young. I mean, he looks young to me, but he had a heart condition from taking too much caffeine. So he wanted to stay with the work he was doing. He's still an entrepreneur and he's making these little drinks. He's doing more things, but I just keep up with the Magic Mind. It has matcha, ashwagandha, bacopa monnieri. And I'm not going to tell you the rest of the ingredients because I don't want to overload your mind, but those 3 ingredients stand out to me because they are in my book and they're good for our mind. And things that are good for our mind at any age are usually good for preventing dementia. I know bacopa monnieri is really an excellent herb for preventing Alzheimer's. Matcha gives you that lift, but it's not as fiery as caffeine. It doesn't have the crash. It gives you a bit more sustained energy. So I love these little drinks. You can also use them for a pick-me-up if you're having a long day or maybe you didn't get great sleep, because let's face it, we're talking about the best scenario here with like the secret kitchen and cooking, but some days we don't have time for all that. Like last weekend I was at a conference, I was talking all day, I was meeting with people, it was a writers conference, and I don't have the time to do all my sustaining routines, eat right. I definitely had no time to cook because I was at a hotel all day. So the little energy shots gave me a pick me up in the afternoon, but I could still sleep at night because if I drink caffeine in the form of coffee or even like black tea, for me, I'm too sensitive. I can't sleep. So I highly recommend Magic Mind. And I have a code, Elise Marie. You can spell it just like my name, 20, Elise Marie 20. You can take that to the website. The website is magicmind.com. Magic and then mind, very simple. And if you add /Elise Marie, you can also get to the specials for Magic Mind, and we'll link that in the chat. So let's get back to our discussion because I want to talk about happy foods. I would love to hear some happy foods that could boost our mood at any age. And if you have any that have a little bit more, if they can also tie into longevity, that would be great. But everybody wants to be happy at any age, right?
absolutely. I mean, that is the primary foundation of any sentient being is to be happy. And okay, so I mean, I've developed like thousands of recipes through the years. So I'm not going to mention one particular recipe. I will mention a group of food that some people might be familiar with and some people not. And I am a super geek when it comes to this type of food. So it is going to be fermented foods, sauerkraut, real pickles, anything that is lacto-fermented or other fermented foods that contain live cultures will give you happiness. It's not going to give you happiness overnight, but if you consistently include fermented foods in your diet, you will find that many of systemic health issues that you might be experiencing, if you are working with a practitioner that's, you're targeted, let's just say leaky gut, because I had that myself. If you are able to bring fermented foods into the mix, using it as food, right? In a gentle manner, the fermented foods will help your healing journey. It's not going to be the silver bullet that does everything, but it is going to be part of your healing journey. And I think there's a lot to be said about the gut microbiome, and also taking it to another level, the health of the mitochondria. So we know that the mitochondria is this incredible entity that merged with us billions of years ago and is the primary spark plug of energy in our entire body. Every cell, except for red blood cells, contain mitochondria. And the science is still very, very new, but they are beginning to recognize that the diversity of your gut microbiome can positively affect the functioning of the mitochondria, and therefore providing you with energy. And when it comes to being a super ager, energy is probably one of the primary things, right? If you have a sluggish brain, if you have aches and pains and you just don't want to move around, the basis is really just energy. So fermented foods will help your gut. It will give you a diverse microbiome, and it will also upregulate your immune system and the resilience. And whatever is happening in your gut is happening in your brain, because the gut and brain are connected. It's connected physically by the vagus nerve. And so that's typically why whenever you have butterflies in your stomach, it's probably because you're nervous about something, and your stomach immediately picks up that cue. Or going the other way, if you have a lot of digestive issues like IBS or Crohn's, you know that whenever you have a bout of terrible bloating or cramping, it's very hard to concentrate on anything. I mean, sometimes it could be even hard to get out of bed. So for me, I've come to understand that a way to really gain happiness through health is to address the gut microbiome. And the most direct way, yes, you can take probiotics and supplements, but you can also easily make many fermented foods at home. And fermentation is one of the original ways of preserving food. There was salt, the sun, and then we had fermentation. Canning came much later. So it is something that it doesn't matter which country or which culture you come from, everybody was doing fermentation in some form.
Wow. And I know you are a big advocate of doing your own fermenting, which I think is great. And I'll ask you a little bit about that. But interestingly, my parents just started, I don't know, we have some fermented foods, but it's almost like we sort of drifted away. I live with my parents who are both in their 90s.
Oh,
And
wow, that's fantastic.
yeah. And one day my dad just brought home these like really great pickles. They're kind of foodies. Like I said, my mom was always
Yes.
food. So they are into really healthy food. And I think that's one of the reasons for their longevity.
Yeah.
So we've been getting these really fantastic, they're live culture pickles, and the pickles are super thick,
Yeah.
Sometimes for my mom, I cut them up a little bit and garnish them on different things, and sauerkraut, but we haven't made our own.
Mhm.
And I know you have some ways to do it it's simple, it's easy. Maybe tell us a little bit. I know you even have a product, which we're not trying to push any products,
Right.
but
Yeah.
sponsor,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
anything that makes our life easier. That's why. And some of the products we've been talking about today do make your life easier. So you
Right.
can have more time to pray and meditate in the kitchen. Take your time, because let's face it, we do live a fast-paced life. We're not going to want to do everything, but there's some things that are really going to be beneficial if we take that time. So tell us a little bit about doing your own fermentation.
With pleasure. So I do have a recipe actually in Happy Foods. I have one sauerkraut recipe, That book came out some years ago, and now I'm even more of a fermentation geek. But I just want to say that this whole aspect of fermenting also ties into the aspect of a sacred kitchen. And it also brings to mind that there are these minute, almost invisible beings that actually help us. The gut microbiome, it is an ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, single cell organisms known as archaea, and bacteria. And so this is an important aspect of who we are. We are an ecosystem. And so when you start making your own sauerkraut or kombucha, a lot of people like to make that nowadays, or your own sourdough bread, basically you are living in a community. You are tapping into the power of these phenomenal microbes that have been around for billions of years. And you're inviting them into your home and you're saying, I recognize you. I may not see you, but I know you're there. And so when you make a batch of sauerkraut, there's the lactic acid bacteria that will happily go into doing whatever they do when you give it the right environment. And making a batch of sauerkraut is really as simple as getting a good quality head of cabbage, from the farmer's market is great, using a good quality salt, and that's it. You don't even have to add in any spices. And you follow a simple recipe, make it, put it into the right environment, use a crock, or you can do small batch using a mason jar. There's like a million things online that you can tap into. It is so basic. And then it also invites you to be a little bit patient, because the sauerkraut is not made in 5 minutes. At a minimum, if you're making a small batch, at least about 2 weeks. But then you are watching that transformation. The power of the lactic acid bacteria are going into play. They will basically push out pathogens that will cause spoilage. And at the end of 2 weeks, you have this fabulous preserved cabbage that has now become a superfood. It is going to provide you with bioavailable probiotics, enzymes, of course, the fiber from the cabbage, and all of the best quality of the cabbage is still retained. And so it's just like a win-win-win thing for me. Plus, I have noticed over time in coaching people, with various health issues, that if they incorporate fermented foods into their diet, it actually can help them wean off sugar and other junk foods that they know are bad for them. And the reason why is because when your gut microbiome becomes more balanced with good bacteria, they will tell you what to eat. It's like talking to your food, your gut will tell you, maybe it's not a great idea to have that chocolate cake today, maybe just have a piece of chocolate, a piece of dark chocolate. So over time, your gut will actually give you the cue, very much like someone who has yeast infection, Candida albicans, right? That's the classic yeast overgrowth. That particular yeast, although we have it in small amounts, is naturally occurring. When it is overgrown, then it's going to be asking you, have that chocolate cake, have that donut, have the deep fry, whatever, because that's what it wants. So when you balance your gut microbiome with the other good probiotics, the lactobacilli strain, they will deplete the candida if you have a candida overgrowth. And basically it is that. The gut is going to deliver that message to your brain, and the brain is going to follow.
Fantastic. I love that. It makes so much sense. Yeah, so fermented foods, everyone, try them, buy them. And do you have a place where there's a recipe or something, a reference? I know you said that you have a recipe in your book. Maybe just we
Right.
will at
Yeah.
the end of if you have a website, or where can people, since they're thinking of it now, and we can put this in the show notes as well, where can people find a simple, recipe, as you mentioned, to
Sure.
ferment?
Sure. And I'm glad you asked that, because, I do have a product, but actually I don't even want to push the product. I just want to push the knowledge. So if they visit my nutrition and food website, which is KarenIsCooking.com. Then there's a tab, fermentation. Then you will find the fermentation recipes.
Wonderful. KarenIsCooking.com, and we'll come
Yeah.
back to the end in case you're driving, or you can find it in the show
Right.
notes.
And it's fairly easy to remember. Karen is spelled exactly like it is, Karen, is cooking.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you have any other happy foods just to kind of mix it up? So
Sure.
we, maybe one or two more that you would we can get easily and well, maybe not effortlessly, but we could incorporate into our week this week, whatever week.
Yeah. Well, to encourage people to cook a little bit more, sauteing greens is probably the easiest thing that you can do. And I don't know why people make such a fuss about it. Like, I don't know how to cook spinach. And I'm like, you don't know how to cook spinach? Well, let me tell you how. Okay. Okay, you know what? And since I brought up spinach, let's just say, go to the store, buy a head of spinach. Super, super easy, right? Or go to the farmer's market. You bring back your dark leafy greens. You give it a rinse if it's very, if it has a lot of silt and dirt with it. Rinse it. Or if you're super lazy, go and get one that has already been cleaned in a bag. I try to advocate against using plastic, but if it deters you, then go ahead and get that cabbage. I mean, not cabbage, but I'm still thinking about sauerkraut. Get the spinach that comes in a bag. Ideally, you want it to be an organic spinach, but it doesn't matter. Just get some spinach, bring it home. Bust out a little pan, a little saute pan. And here's the thing that's going to turn it into a happy dish of sauteed spinach. You need to have good fats. Good fats feeds the brain. So my choice here would be coconut oil. Okay, so let's say for one big bunch of spinach, use 1 to 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. It is good for the brain. It is not bad for the heart. Elise, you know this. Put that coconut oil into the pan. If you like garlic, crush a garlic, add that in. If you like onions, dice up some onions, put it in. Saute it for about a minute. Add in the spinach. Let it cook down. You can add in a little bit of water if you like, or if you have some mineral broth, add that. Spinach cooks down very, very quickly. So this is all going to happen within 5 minutes, right? And then at the end, here's the thing. At the end, give it a little bit of acid, whether it's a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice, because there are a lot of minerals bound within the spinach. But it is better if we can hit it with acid at the end. It will help to liberate the minerals. So when we eat it, we can access it easier in terms of digestion. So all of that, literally minus the buying time, it takes 5 minutes to cook spinach. So,
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't know, there's nothing like a big bowl of, really beautifully sauteed greens. The color itself, right, makes you happy. So that would be one example of a quick, happy food that you can easily make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hungry now.
You're hungry?
That was the same thing. I saw Karen's mouth moving. And I was both thinking ahead. It's getting to be close to we're on different time zones, but
right. Yeah.
Hey, when can I go out and get some spinach?
And
yeah. I love the tip of adding that acid or vinegar, because I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, and just a little bit. You don't have to do a lot, to one big bunch of spinach or collard greens or kale, whatever, after it's been well cooked, just before you take it out of the pan, like about up to a tablespoon, if you have fresh lemon juice, I prefer that. But if you have any kind of vinegar, just that little bit of vinegar is going to help.
Right. That's awesome. Is there another food, a happy food?
A happy food. Well, chocolate. But there's a caveat here. It's not a Kit Kat bar, right? It's not a what is it called? Milky Way or whatever. Those they are not chocolate. There's something else which I'm not going to use words to describe what they are because they're not going to be good words. Get real chocolate, dark chocolate. I don't eat chocolate that's less than 70% cacao. So get the darkest chocolate that your palate will tolerate. And over time, you will develop a palate for really good dark chocolate. And you know, all you need is literally a little square. In the afternoon, if I'm just feeling I need to have a little treat that feels really indulgent, one little square of chocolate, just let it melt in your mouth. And that's the important thing. Let it melt. I actually, some years ago, I met a chocolatier or chocolatier, as they say in French, and he was very adamant about not chewing your chocolate. You need to let it melt. Let your body temperature start to melt it on your palate, and that way you truly enjoy the essence of the chocolate. And of course, we know that chocolate also has a lot of antioxidants. It's good for the brain. I think it also upregulates your production of GABA. So GABA is important to feel calm, but at the same time, you can concentrate. And by the way, I forgot to mention, Elise, when you mentioned the matcha, that's what matcha does. It upregulates GABA so that you can concentrate on a task, but without feeling jittery, which coffee does for some people. So that would be my final happy food to share with people. Chocolate, but good quality, dark chocolate.
I love that. That's so important. And it also covers like different tastes, different flavors. I think you can't have it unsweetened, but you can have a little. I know there's different chocolates that I've tried that have
Right.
sweeteners. And like you said, you can acclimate to less sweet because some of the desserts, once you start not having as much sweets, they're like, whoa, this is too sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so powerful. I'm glad you mentioned that because I have worked with people in the past where we did, sugar cleanse and we didn't do sugar for, let's say, 2 weeks. And when you return to it, it's so sweet that it makes you almost want to gag, and you wonder, like, how could I have eaten that day after day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing how our tastes change. This is
Right.
such an amazing discussion. I'm wondering if you have any final words about cooking and how we can do that sustainably or eating, something in your, I'm just seeing you stirring a pot in your sacred kitchen. How can we go forward becoming super agers, being super agers, and incorporating that into our life? Is there one final tip or bit of wisdom? It doesn't have to be like a tip. It could be just a different way of thinking. And then we'll give your information for our listeners.
Okay, thank you, Elise. Well, I think my final tip would be to really just enjoy whatever dish you are going to cook in the kitchen, whether you are a seasoned chef or a newbie that's going to, grab that spinach and saute it like we did. Don't think it as a task. Think of it as an experience, right? An experience that is potentially highly transformative if you can allow it to be. So very much like I think people get really excited about, going out to dinner because you're going to dine at this special restaurant or going on a trip because it's so special. You've been waiting for it forever. It just takes a shift in the mind stream of how we look at cooking a dish. It could be a dish that you have never cooked before. So in and of itself, it's a journey. And at the end of it, you arrive at this beautiful dish and it actually nourishes you. So yeah, think of it as an experience, a transformational journey that is totally manageable because it is hopefully in your own sacred kitchen.
Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So you can find our guest today at her website, KarenIsCooking.com. Karen is cooking.com. You can find information about her books, about fermentation. and the Sacred Kitchen, her courses, her coaching work. And I don't know, are you on social media or any other place where we can find you?
I am, Elise, although, as someone who's trying to be a super ager, I kind of feel like social media takes so much out of me. But I have several, but I think the easiest one is literally on Instagram at Karen is cooking.
Oh,
That's
wonderful.
the best one, yes.
And super agers, we don't post all the time. We post when we can, but
Yeah.
that's how it is. And we got to be super aging every day.
Yes, absolutely. Every moment.
Sustainable. Yeah, it does take up a lot of time. Any final words from you, Karen, our host?
Well, all I know is that I'm not cooking tonight, but tomorrow night when I'm cooking, I'm going to be thinking of a lot of these things. And you can't give me some really good suggestions, especially with the spinach, because it's something that I love. My husband doesn't care for, but I can make a small batch of it. And you know what? I think that's going to make me feel really good at the end of the day. So thank you
Okay,
for the
good.
recipe. Appreciate it. In the meantime, we'll talk to all of you next month. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.
Super
Thank you,
aging.
Elise. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.